Welcome, my friend. Today, buckle up because today we are doing something a little different. We are going off island, like way off island. We're leaving the Keys behind and heading up to Central Florida to explore the hidden Key West Easter eggs tucked inside Disney's old Key West resort. And yes, I know it's not actually in Key West. There's no rooster crashing your breakfast, nobody arguing about the line at the southernmost point, and zero chickens plotting to steal your snacks. But here's the thing. Disney Imagineers built an entire fictional Florida Keys town called Conch Flats, and it's basically a scavenger hunt for anyone who loves the islands. We're talking the Flagler Railroad hiding in the lobby, paint blue porch ceilings. There's spooky folklore behind those, trust me. A bar named the Gurgling Suitcase, Olivia's Cafe with a backstory that'll make you smile, Hemingway's cozy little Papa's Den, turtles absolutely everywhere, pastel porches for days, and obviously key lime pie. So grab a frozen something, get comfy, and let's go exploring. This one's a fun one. Let's dive in.
Hey there, island dreamers, locals, and anyone craving a slice of paradise. Welcome back, or welcome for the first time, to the Fun in Key West podcast, where the vibe is always laid back, the stories are salty, and the drinks, well, they're definitely frozen. I'm your host, Michelle O'Connor, your unofficial tour guide to the Conch Republic. Whether you're planning your first trip, your fifth trip, or you're just daydreaming about trading the cubicle for the ocean breeze, you are in the right place. Here's the deal. This podcast is your insider's guide to all things Key West. We're talking where to eat, hello, conch fritters and key lime pie. Where to drink, spoiler alert, there will be rum. Where to stay, and all the quirky, wonderful things that make Key West the one-of-a-kind paradise we all love. Plus, we'll keep you up to date on the latest happenings, festivals, events, maybe even the occasional Hemingway lookalike sighting. And just to keep things spicy, we'll be bringing on some amazing guests now and then, locals, business owners, and people who know the island like the back of their sandy hand. So grab your flip-flops, pour yourself a cold one, and let's escape to the island state of mind together, whether you're tuning in from your hammock or your commute, while wishing it was a hammock. We've got all the Key West goodness coming your way. Thanks for being here. It's going to be a lot of fun in Key West. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Fun in Key West, where every day feels like a mini fest. Grab a drink, take it slow. We'll show you where the locals go. Food, fun, and stories to tell. Hidden gems you know so well. Your Key West experts here to say it's fun in Key West every day.
Welcome to the Fun in Key West podcast. I am so glad that you are here. Today we are going off island, out of the Keys, heading up to Central Florida, and we are going to be exploring the hidden Key West gems and Easter eggs that you can find in Disney. And let's begin, and it starts at Disney's old Key West resort, which I know is not in Key West, obviously. There are no roosters crossing Duval Street. There's no one arguing about how long the line is for the southernmost point. And you're probably not going to encounter a chicken trying to steal anything that you're eating, although you might see other birds and those wildlife around Disney World. But the Disney Imagineers did something really interesting here. They created a fictional Florida Keys community called Conch Flats. And if you look closely as you wander through this resort, it's filled with nods to Key West history. There are bridges, there are trains, there are porches, waterways, turtles, fictional locals, Hemingway references, and neighborhood cafes, and one very funny bar name, and of course, key lime pie. Today, we, like I said, are heading outside of Key West. As a matter of fact, we're heading outside of the Florida Keys up to Central Florida, and we are going to explore the Key West details hidden inside of Disney's Old Key West Resort. But if you're, like I said, welcome to the Fun in Key West podcast. We normally talk about everything that has to do with Key West and the Florida Keys, but every once in a while, we find things that are a little bit different. Key West sneaks itself into things that are outside of Key West and the Florida Keys. And if you have a place where you're at or that you visited that is all about Key West, but not in the Florida Keys, let me know in the comments. But stay with me. Today is not a resort review of Disney's Old Key West Resort. It's a story about how Key West inspired this place. It's how Key West shows up in places and how the island's history gets interpreted by Disney Imagineers. And they used that interpretation to create their own version of an old Florida Keys community. But before we cross over that bridge into Florida and learn all about Conch Flats, today's episode is sponsored to you by Out of Here Travel. Whether you are planning a Walt Disney World vacation, a trip to Key West, a Florida getaway, a cruise, Alaska adventure, or somewhere completely different, Out of Here Travel can help you sort through all of those moving pieces. Because let's face it, when you are planning a vacation, it often begins with one innocent internet search. And the next thing you know, you've got 37 tabs open. You've got 3 resort maps, 6 restaurant menus open, and no memory of what you were originally looking for. Kevin over at Out of Here Travel can help you choose the destination, resort, and experiences that fit the way you actually want to travel. And if Disney's Old Key West Resort sounds like the perfect place, and that adds a little bit of island atmosphere to your Orlando vacation, he can help with that too. Learn more at outofheretravel.com, and that's OUTAHERE travel.com, and let them help you plan your next adventure. So why in the world am I talking about a Disney resort on the Fun in Key West podcast? Well, I think this gives us an opportunity to do a little bit of diving into theme park anthology or anthropology. We're not simply asking, is this a fun resort? Is it pretty? Why did Disney choose this? Why are there bridges? Why are there turtles? Why are there porches? Why is there a train station? Why is the bar called the Gurgling Suitcase? Why create fictional residents instead of just simply naming everything recognizable in Key West and the Florida Keys? Well, Disney didn't recreate one exact neighborhood, a building, or a period in Key West history. Instead, it picked up recognizable pieces of Florida Keys life and used them to build an imaginary town. And that imaginary town is Conch Flats. It's polished, it's an idealized Disney version of a really fun community located in the Florida Keys during the mid-century. So let's do a little bit of history about the Old Key West Resort. It was originally opened in 1991, December 20th to be exact, and it was the original Disney Vacation Club Resort. It wasn't known as the Old Key West Resort at that point in time, but it still had this Key West Resort feel and its theming. In 1996, it was renamed as the Old Key West Resort, and that makes it more than just a themed hotel. It is part of Disney's Vacation Club history, but it also gives the opportunity to walk through and explain, this tranquil community that they created. Conch Flats. It's a fictional town inspired by the Florida Keys. It includes waterways and palm trees and villas and porches and casual dining, and all of the buildings are arranged like a neighborhood. So they're in these neighborhood-styled clusters. And I think that layout really matters. Instead of building one great big building that's a tower that you just go in, this feels like more like a collection of homes and businesses and gathering places. It's Conch Flats. It's that small community. So they're not just telling you, Disney Imagineers, that this is a resort. It's actually telling you that this is a small community. Welcome home to Conch Flats. And speaking of, as you come into the resort, you are going to cross over a bridge. And I've got a picture, if you're not watching, a picture of the bridge that you cross over as you enter into Old Key West. And this is before you enter into the hospitality house and you get all of that. Disney Imagineers start the story early and they establish the fact that you are part of and entering into the Florida Keys. So the roadway stretches across water and you're on this long, low bridge. And beyond it, you're going to see, and in this picture, you can see the pastel buildings and the palm trees up here. And the bridge is designed to give you that idea that you're traveling down the overseas highway. You see those arches that are built in the bridge. Those you're going to see in the bridges as you cross down the overseas highway. They were originally designed as part of the Flagler Overseas Railway that allowed water to flow back and forth. Today, it still allows water to flow back and forth, but it also allows boats to cross underneath the bridges. But I think this is a wonderful detail that harkens back to Key West and that wonderful drive that you have all the way down the overseas highway. And many people and many of you talk about driving down the overseas highway and how fun that is and how the road takes you from island to island and you've got the water on both sides. And this is how people traveled by rail before the overseas highway was actually built. Henry Flagler's Florida East Coast Railway carried passengers across the Keys on the overseas railroad. But the devastating hurricane in 1935 on Labor Day ended the rail service because portions of the railroad route and several of the bridges were taken out. Some of those pieces were intact, though, and then rebuilt to be part of the overseas highway for automobile traffic. And as you drive down today, you can see how the overseas highway connects back to that earlier railroad story. You see all of those remnants of the original railway there. So when you cross the bridge into Old Key West Resort, it feels more like you're coming into a community than a hotel entrance. It creates that transition. So you're leaving the traffic and the theme parks and the busy roads behind. You cross the water and you're being welcomed home into Conch Flats. And so the main area is called the Hospitality House. And rather than treating it like a standard hotel lobby that you walk into, Disney Imagineers designed it to function as the town center of Conch Flats. And this is where you're going to find many of the things that you're going to find in a community and its primary gathering places. You're going to have the lobby or your check-in area. This is actually made to look like a train station. So this is the center of Conch Flats. This is where all the hustle and bustle happens, the ins and outs of people coming and going. Across the way, you have Olivia's Cafe. In the lobby, you have this quiet section called Papa's Den. Around the corner, you have Conch Flats General Store. Outside and around the corner, you have the Gurgling Suitcase. And you also have Goods Food to Go. And then down on around the other corner, you have the pool and you have a marina area. And of course, there's some really fun community spaces. This is a picture of the outside of Livia's, but it also gives you an idea of how these buildings are connected and that feeling that you have. They're pastel colors, they have the gingerbread on them, and they look an awful lot like some of the houses that you're going to see in Key West. And again, these buildings are arranged more like the center of a small waterfront town versus, just some large resort area. And its design is to help sell that idea that Conch Flats has residents, it has a history, and it has community traditions. And so you're not just checking into a hotel. You are arriving into a town. You are arriving at Conch Flats. And as you walk into the main lobby, you are going to see so many things. One of the things you're going to see, and this is what I have a picture of if you're not watching but listening, there's a picture of the Flagler Railroad. It's a model display with the bridges that you can see of how they were designed. And in the early 1900s, Key West could be reached by boat and plane and train. And that transportation history is worked into the resort's design. The check-in area, like I said, resembles a small train station, and this model train is on display to reinforce that connection. And so you have a vintage style train going over one of those bridges with the water underneath. And at first it's like, oh, that's kind of cute. That's a Disney detail. But I think the train is actually really important. It represents one of the most important transportation stories in the Florida Keys history. It's how the mainland got connected to all of the Keys and Key West. And it brought in more goods and services and people and tourists. Henry Flagler, who designed this idea and came up with this amazing engineering feat, thought, you know what, there should be a train that takes us all the way down the Keys. And this was back in a time where people weren't going to say, you're crazy, this is never going to happen. But when he decided he was going to build this, he built it. And a lot of it was built with his own money. But he decided to take the train on down through the Florida Keys. And a lot of people were like, there is no way that this is ever going to happen. You're not going to be able to finish it. The workers, and if you look at this picture, think about it, they had to build these bridges across open water and shallow flats and exposed stretches of ocean. And as you drive down the overseas highway, you see these bridges. And imagine back in the early 1900s building this with the tools that they had available. They had to work through intense heat. They had storms and very, very dangerous conditions that they built. But eventually, that Key West extension of the Flagler Railroad was completed. And in January of 1912, the first official train made it all the way to Key West with Mr. Flagler on board himself. The route became known as the Overseas Railroad and was celebrated as an engineering achievement. The railroad changed how people and supplies and mail and visitors got to and from Key West. It connected the island more directly to the mainland and became part of the island's transformation during the early 20th century. Rail service, like I said, ended Labor Day of 1935 because of the hurricane damaged the line so severely. Florida later acquired portions of the route and sections were adopted to create the Overseas Highway. And so I think this model train that you're seeing is one of the most meaningful details in Old Key West Resort. It's not simply a transportation themed decoration. I think it points to the actual historical impact of the railway and the railroad and how it helped reshape modern Florida Keys. And so I think this is one of my favorite Easter eggs that you find over in Old Key West. It's beyond the pastel paint, it's beyond the palm trees. I think the fact that the Disney Imagineers tucked this amazing piece of history in the lobby. So it's one of those things that you see upon checkout and check-in that harkens back to the history of Key West. The entire resort is, like I said, is built around this fictional community called Conch Flats. And Conch, of course, is a name given to somebody who is native to Key West, that was born there, and they are known as Conchs. People who move to Key West and stay long enough sometimes can be called a freshwater conch. The word flats refers to those shallow waters around the Keys. You've got the mangroves and the shallow waters and those backcountry areas that a lot of people go out and they kayak in now or fish in, but they're found throughout the Florida Keys. So together, Conch Flats, the name of the town sounds like it could exist anywhere between Key Largo or Key West. And so this idea allows Disney to create its own residents, its own businesses, landmarks, and local legends. So that is why so many places at the resort are named after fictional people and stories rather than Disney characters. So as you are part of and visiting Conch Flats, you are going to need to go shopping. And of course, the residents need a place to shop as well. And so instead of Disney creating a gift shop, they created the Conch Flats General Store. Communities always needed a place to go grab their essentials. And we talk about that in Key West as we wander around and look at those historical landmarks. You have those neighborhood stores, those places where those neighborhoods went to get their groceries and their essentials. That's the idea that we have here at the general store. And so this is where the residents of Conch Flats can purchase food and household supplies and whatever recently arrived by boat or train or truck. So you have here, you can get, of course, your souvenirs. You can get groceries and drinks and snacks and some of those things that you sort of forgot to pack, that you can find those here. So it's indeed a general store that you can find right there in the resort. But one of the interesting things as you start to wander around the resort is, again, it is not a tall tower. It's these buildings that are grouped together like a neighborhood. And they are made up of 2 to 3 story buildings, and they're painted in the wonderful pastel shades of aqua and peach and pale green and cream and pink and blue. And you're also going to notice the porches and the exterior staircases and the white railings and the metal style roofs and the gingerbread trim and tropical landscaping and those neighborhood styled clusters. So it's going to remind you a lot of Key West as you start to walk around. You're also going to notice some of the fact that there's some details that are tucked in that are slightly like Key West, but a lot like Disney. So again, you've got the collection of homes, and this is how Key West Imagineers designed the resort so it didn't feel like a resort. It felt more like a community and a place that you were there. Like people lived there. Like you could live there. And that the streets are named, and you have this ability just to wander like you do in Key West. You're going to notice gingerbread trim, and I do have a photo of some gingerbread railing up if you are listening. And it has some interesting designs. It has hidden Mickeys in it as well, because obviously we are on Disney property, so there will be some hidden Mickeys. But this type of ornament, this type of gingerbread and these type of details is what you're going to see as you wander through Key West as well. You're going to see the gingerbread. It's going to talk about who lived there. If you see a ship's steering and everything related back to nautical, maybe it was a ship captain that lived there. So you're going to find a lot of information that is going to be there. But they chose the palettes and the architecture to really bring back that feeling that you are not exactly in Disney, but maybe. The other thing you're going to notice is you're going to look up at the ceilings, and they're going to be painted this beautiful pastel bluish green, and that's primarily called haint blue. And the underside of the porch roof is often painted this color. And you're going to see that a lot in Key West, especially in some of those older neighborhoods as you go off the ball. You're going to see that those ceilings are painted this beautiful blue. And it's very common in coastal southern regions, especially Key West. According to folklore, spirits, known as haints, could be confused or repelled by a ceiling painted the color of water or sky. Therefore, they couldn't cross over into the home. And that was one way that folklore had it, that you could protect your home. And I think that's one of the things that, as I always talk about, is if you blink, you're going to miss a detail. In Disney as well as in Key West. Wander around, look at those details. Look at the architecture of the homes in Key West. Look at the metal roofs. Look at how the windows are done, the shutters, the really fun details that are not only original to the home, but what the new homeowner has added to make it more their style. but still pay homage to the historic nature of the home. You're also going to see porches. Again, you see these all through Key West. There's always a porch. And I love to stay in places in Key West that have outside areas, porches, outside areas. It's that extension of the inside. It allows you to have that ability to sit out at night and have a cocktail, or sit out in the morning and have your cup of coffee. And so in Key West, it's not just decoration. It's a place where maybe it's shaded, maybe there's a cool breeze, maybe it's a place where you can just have conversation, a place where people gather and have really great talks. And that is the vibe that these Disney Imagineers brought to Old Key West. There are these porches. And I think it just creates this really cool thing. Another thing that I noticed as I was wandering through the resort was this picture of, and I'm showing a picture of a bicycle leaning up against a wall. And how interesting is it that they chose a bicycle that looked like this? It has a basket on the back so you can carry your grocery, a basket on the front to carry your groceries. It has a hauling thing on the back so you can put your whatever you're hauling or doing there as well. But bicycles are part of everyday life in Key West. It's a compact island, and parking, as we talk about all the time, is an absolute nightmare. And so the best way to get around and the easiest way to get around is by bike. And I love how they have this section here devoted to that theming of the bike. The other thing that you're going to look at, and I now have a picture of the front of Olivia's on here, and Olivia's is the neighborhood restaurant. This is the resort's main table service restaurant, but Olivia is not a character from any Disney film. She is part of the fictional history of Conch Flats. So Disney presents, and here's the backstory of Olivia. Olivia is a longtime resident, maybe a conch. I'm going to go with the fact that she's a conch and not just a freshwater conch. She's a conch. She's been there forever. And she lives there, and she has amazing cooking, and she's just offers her home and opens it up and is full of hospitality. And she's made her home the local gathering place. And the story shared around the backstory in the resort is that Olivia is welcomed to neighbors and travelers. And some versions of the backstory say that the reason why there's mismatched decor is the fact as her place, she outgrew her home. She had to then move into this place. And because it was all done on bootstrapping and on a shoestring budget, people would bring in their chairs and their utensils and other household items in exchange for meals to help her set up the restaurant. That sounds a lot like Key West, doesn't it? So I think as you enter in, the restaurant's going to feel casual and colorful, and it's going to feel more like a neighborhood restaurant than a formal resort dining room. And you're going to find family photographs and a lot of homey details inside. If you've ever been there or stayed there or have eaten at Olivia's, let me know. So this is, Conch Flats, the story of Olivia is she's essentially the town cook. And this is a place where the neighbors come. The neighbors gather and the travelers can find a meal. And there's always there's room for one more person at the table. And on the menu, you're going to find a lot of things that you're going to sound familiar if you travel to Key West a lot. You're going to have crab cakes and hush puppies and conch fritters and mahi mahi and shrimp and grits and, of course, key lime pie. But don't forget to check out their pineapple mango upside down cake. Now, we're going to enter back into the main lobby, and now I'm showing a picture of a fireplace and some bookshelves, and this is Papa's Den and the Hemingway connection. And this, of course, Papa was one of Ernest Hemingway's best known nicknames. And this is one of the clearest literary nods inside the resort. And Hemingway lived in Key West and in the 1930s, lived there for about, 12 years. He wrote in his studio, which is behind his Whitehead Street home, and he's a permanent fixture within the island's literary history. But here in Papa's Den, you're going to find these bookshelves, and it's a cozy place with chairs that you can sit and relax and have something, just have some quiet time, read a book. So you have, here's the bookcase. You're going to have, of course, this marlin over the mantle, and it's a small version of the one that you probably see in Sloppy Joe's, along with the hardware that you use for fishing. And so I think this is a cozy sitting place that all of these objects on the bookshelf are talk about travel and fishing and writing, because you've got photographs and old books, and it's not a replica of his actual studio. Instead, I think it's a quiet wink and a nod to Hemingway. Of course, Disney does not have any roosters or chickens or six-toed cats wandering the property, but there is a cat sculpture tucked within the bookcases, and here's a picture of that. As well as you can see again on this photo, the bookcase has lots of fish and old books and things that talk about maybe those little trinkets that you pick up as you go traveling around. And I think this makes it feel a wonderful place to go explore. But if you're looking to explore and learn more, I'm going to do a shout out again to our sponsor, Out of Here Travel. So we've crossed the bridge into Conch Flats. We've followed Flagler's Railroad. We've studied the porches. We visited Olivia's Cafe. We've seen Papa's Den. But before we go further and explore the waterways and one of the best named bars in Walt Disney World, a quick reminder that today's episode is sponsored by Out of Here Travel. Choosing the right Disney resort is much more about finding an available room. You got to consider location and transportation and room size and dining and theming and budget, and how much energy do you want surrounding you after you've been at theme parks all day. Out of Here Travel, specifically Kevin over at Out of Here Travel, can help you compare a lot of those choices and build a vacation that works for you and your travel style. So learn more over at outofheretravel.com. Let's check in to see if there's anybody with any comments. Now, we're coming to one of my favorite places on property, which is the Gurgling Suitcase. And they have some really fun cocktails here. It's a very small bar. It's tucked near Olivia's Cafe and by the main pool. It's around the corner. It has very limited seating, but it's got this really fun, funky bar. It's got colorful bottles, and it just has this neighborhood bar atmosphere. And it feels like a local watering hole. And I think it fits perfectly in with the Key West theming. Now, why is it called the Gurgling Suitcase? This is where another Key West detail is provided. So the popular backstory to that is this name connects it to the Prohibition era travelers carrying alcohol from Cuba. And the idea is that the customs officer could shake a suspicious suitcase and listen for the sound of gurgling liquid. Therefore, if the suitcase gurgled, it was full of alcohol. And of course, the bar's logo reinforces that joke with imagery of someone hurrying away with a suitcase and a drink. So I think this is a great name for the bar. It has some really fun cocktails inside, so be sure to check out the Gurgling Suitcase while you're over there. Of course, you come to Key West, you see the waters. You go to Old Key West and you see waters. And this is a picture of, again, the bridge that crosses over into the entrance, but it's also the dock of where you would be when you take the boat from Disney Springs over to Old Key West. So that's how you can, from Old Key West, get to Disney Springs is by boat. So you can go through this really fun canal and see all kinds of really cool things. And I think that's a really great way to connect yourself back to Disney Springs. And you've got the Trumbo Canal connection. And this is really kind of a funny thing is you've got all of this information about the waters and how people are connected and what all they do. And, you have Trumbo Canal points toward Trumbo Point in Key West. And Trumbo Point was created through dredging and land reclamation during the early 20th century. So that connected with the railroad area development and the plans for the expanded port facilities, because as the trains were coming down, What they needed to do was have a place where all of that people could be, and you would have a lot of cargo coming in and out. So they rebuilt and was anticipating that this was going to be where a lot of that was going to come through. So as you look through all of this, be sure to check out all of those connections, especially along the waterways. What's also really fun is the connection back to turtles. You're going to find turtles located all throughout the resort. And you're going to see turtles, turtle names such as Turtle Crawl, Turtle Pond, Old Turtle Pond Road, and Turtle Shack. And so the turtles of the Florida Keys were woven into the fictional character names in the town story. And the fictional mayor of Conch Flats is Cooter Trumbo. And cooter is a term used in the southeastern United States for certain freshwater turtles. So that's your did you know fact for the day. And of course, you have Turtle Crawl, which has a very deep Key West connection. So a turtle crawl is an enclosure used to hold live turtles. And if you are in Key West and you go down to the historic seaport, the old Turtle Crawls restaurant, which is now the Boathouse, would sit upon where it was the old Turtle Crawls, and that's where they would house those live turtles until they were processed and they were made into turtle soup and all of that. Of course, that industry shut down, but that is the connection back to Key West with the turtles. And so if you are on that waterfront coming in on a boat from Disney Springs, they have little racks that look like they would hold turtles, and that's their connection as well back to that. The other thing that you're going to notice as you come around the corner from the Gurgling Suitcase is you're going to see the main pool, and it has a lighthouse. Now, this white lighthouse that I'm showing a picture of with the red stripes, it rises above the pool, and it's pretty cool. It is not an exact replica of the Key West Lighthouse. No, it's not. Instead, it's a broader symbol of some of those communities and those lighthouses that you would see throughout the Florida Keys or up and down the seaboard. And so it kind of it's a replica, and it's a broader symbol, so it's not an exact replica, the one that you find in Key West. But it harkens back to the Key West connection to the seas. And so you had sailors and the fishermen and the wreckers and the sponge divers and the naval ships and the reefs and the shipwrecks and the lighthouse keepers and all of their connections and all of these roles and all of these people, how they played into the history of Key West. And so the lighthouse gathers many of those people together, and it tells us that we are near water because you see the lighthouse. And it tells us that travelers are arriving, and it suggests that maybe there's another story that we start happening. And of course, you have a sandcastle pool, which goes back to all of those sandcastle competitions that you see in Key West, and I think that's so fun. Especially if you have kids and you're down for Disney and you want to have them do something fun, the sandcastle pool. So I think that this section then connects you onto the larger section of Conch Flats. So there's small details around Conch Flats that feel like a town, and you're seeing a picture of a frozen key lime pie that you can get there next to the Gurgling Suitcase from Goods Food to Go. Is it as good as the one that you can get in Key West? No. Will it satisfy a sweet tooth if you're craving something for that? You bet. And so I want you to be able to keep that in mind, that this is the ability to have a piece of key lime pie while you're in Conch Flats. And again, it's not what you are going to think of when you think of those frozen key lime pies on a stick from Kermit's, but it's close. It's sweeter. So I'm just going to throw that out there. It is absolutely sweeter. So you can go on through all of that. What Disney got right. I think let's wrap this up with what did Disney get right? Disney's old Key West resort is not the real Key West. And honestly, it shouldn't try to be. There's too many ways that it would go wrong if you tried to be a replica of Key West. The real island is layered, it has history, it's complicated, and you can't squeeze Key West into a resort and be able to say, yep, that's Key West. But Disney did capture several pieces that give you the feeling of the Florida Keys. You get the journey. So you get that entrance bridge, that sense that reaching the islands is part of the story and crossing the bridges. You get the transportation story, you get the history, you get to see the railroad and the connection to the railroad in the main lobby. You get the architecture, the pastel colors, the gingerbread, the metal roofs, the coastal feel of the architecture. You get the neighborhood feeling. So as Key West is divided up into neighborhoods, you get the neighborhood feeling of this resort because the way the cottages are designed. You see water, there's canals and water everywhere. So you feel like you're on an island and not just a landlocked resort. I love the details of the fictional locals. You've got Olivia and Papa and Cooter Trumbo and other imagined residents that make up Conch Flats. You feel like you're in an inhabited community in a town, not just a resort. You get history details that are accurate. You get such as Trumbo Canal and Turtle Crawl. And so as you start to dig into the Key West and the Florida Keys history, you see that they're trying to make those connections. Of course, you have all the humor that you find throughout Key West. The gurgling suitcase. Come on, shaking the suitcase to see if you hear gurgling. No other place other than Key West would do that. And I think the pace of this resort harkens back to the vibe that you have in the Florida Keys. It's a lot more relaxed. It's slower paced. You don't have a lot of bells and whistles in terms of entertaining things, but it is a very slower pace and a great place just to relax. What the real Key West has that obviously Disney could not, recreate. So like I said, Disney can recreate the pastel buildings, the porches, the tropical landscape. They can provide boats. They can have a lighthouse. They can have little local legends with backstories. But they can't reproduce what Key West gives us in that vibe, that salt air, the real historic buildings, the ones that have stories that go on and on and on. Generations of complicated island history, just layered upon layer. Independent business owners with enormous personalities. Just think of those businesses, those small businesses that you wander in and that we've interviewed on our podcast, and how wonderful they are. You have DJ over at the Key West Bath and Body Company. You have Paul with First Legal Rum Distillery. You have these larger than life characters that make up the stories of Key West. You don't have, and they can't recreate those artists and those writers and those musicians and all of those characters that you encounter as you wander through Key West. Obviously, they don't have the roosters interrupting you at all days and at all hours of the day or night. You don't have the Duval Street chaos in the evening or the quiet of it in the morning. There's no sunset. There's no sunset culture or anything like that. So Old Key West Resort is polished and clean and it's curated, but the real Key West, I think, is layered and perfect and alive, and it has all these really fun things. So should you stay at Old Key West if you're heading into Central Florida and going to be visiting Disney? I think if you prefer a quieter resort, you like villa-style accommodations, not a tower of those. You want room to spread out. You possibly maybe want your own balcony or your own patio. I think if you love Key West and the Florida Keys, you're going to love exploring this place and trying to figure out what they were trying to do and all the little Easter eggs that they have hidden. This gets you a break from character-themed resorts. It gives you that neighborhood style so you can wander around the resort with that neighborhood. You can take the boat to Disney Springs. And I think it's more spread out. So keep that in mind. If you prefer to be closer to transportation and the restaurants, this may be farther spread out and you're going to have to walk a bit. It does cover a large area. There is a golf course. We have stayed there, and our room backed up onto the golf course. So if you enjoy golf, you're pretty darn close to the golf course. So just keep that in mind. Disney has made some changes, so can you visit this resort and check it out before staying? You can, but there is a bit of some changes that have happened. If you are staying on property, you can take transportation from Disney Springs. If you're staying on property, meaning any Disney resort, you can resort hop from Disney Springs to go check it out. If you are a local or not staying at a Disney resort, you cannot hop to a resort from Disney Springs, but you can go to other parks and go explore the resorts that way. Just be sure to check that out. You could also, though, if you are visiting or a local and want to go check out Olivia's Cafe, make a reservation and you could park at Disney Springs and head over, because as long as you have a reservation, you can park and use Disney Springs transportation. But be sure to check all of that out before you make all those decisions. Again, Kevin over at Out of Here Travel is able to answer a lot of those questions on how you can get around. So to wrap all of this up, Disney recreated the feeling of old Key West, but they didn't try to recreate Key West exactly. And that's probably why I think this concept works. Instead, Disney studied the mood and pulled out the stories. They have the bridges, the Flagler Railroad, the pastel homes, the porches, the gingerbread trim, the blue ceilings, the bicycles, the waterways, the boats, the turtles, the fictional locals that are larger than life with an amazing stories, Hemingway, a neighborhood cafe, a tiny bar with an amazing name. Come on, the Gurgling Suitcase. It has a lighthouse, and of course, you have key lime pie. I think together those details create something that feels less like a Disney character themed hotel and more like an imaginary Florida Keys town. It can't recreate Key West, so don't mishear me. It is not recreating Key West. It cannot reproduce generations of history and local personalities, Duval Street, or a rooster yelling at you at your breakfast table. But it does something Disney does very well. It studied the area, the Florida Keys and Key West, and it took those things and plucked them out and brought back the vibe of that. And if you think about how long it's been around, I think it's done well. I think Old Key West is worth slowing down for if you want to be in a place that is not Disney themed, but has something that feels a little more coastal and a little more relaxed. So here's my question for you. Have you ever stayed or visited Disney's Old Key West Resort? And did it remind you of Key West? And what detail did you notice first? And did I miss any of those Easter eggs that I need to find on my next visit? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for hanging out with me as I explored something beyond the Florida Keys and up in Central Florida. I find it interesting that there are some amazing places located across the country that want to bring that Key West vibe and culture to that location. And it's not that they're trying to recreate Key West, but they're trying to recreate that vibe and that feeling we all have when we're in Key West. And that's one of the things we talk about a lot over at FunInKeyWest.com is if you can't be in Key West, how do you recreate that vibe, that feeling, that feeling in your backyard tiki bar or your basement bar? How do you do that? How do you feel like you're in Key West and be able to relive all of that? So we have a lot of information over there on cocktails and island-inspired recipes that you can add to your rotation to make you feel like maybe you're in Key West when you're not able to get there. If you want to learn more about how to get to Key West and be able to maybe talk about Key West or Alaska or any type of cruising, check out Out of Here Travel and be sure to tell Kevin that we sent you. In the meantime, you guys, I appreciate you guys sticking with me, wandering. So glad that you stayed with us and that you are part of what we're doing. In the meantime, be sure to check out FunInKeyWest.com. There's lots of information over there on what to see and what to do in Key West, lots of free guides, as well as our book club. And we are having so much fun on that book club. Stay tuned for more things happening. You guys have a great day. Thank you for being here, and we'll talk to you later. Bye. Well, that's it, my friend. That's our little Disney detour. Is Disney's Old Key West Resort the real deal? Nope. But did the Imagineers capture that laid-back, pastel-painted, salty air island vibe we all love? Yeah, honestly, yeah, I think so. And it's kind of the magic of it. So now I want to hear from you. Have you ever stayed at Old Key West Resort? Did it give you those Keys feels? And most importantly, what detail did you spot first? And did I miss any of those Easter eggs? I need to hunt them down next time. Drop it in the comments or let me know, send me a DM. I'm nosy and I really love a good list. Want more island goodness? Head over to FunInKeyWest.com. We've got tons of free guides, what to do tips, cocktail and island inspired recipes to bring the Key West vibe home, and our super fun book club that you are totally invited to join. And a big thank you to today's sponsor, Outta Here Travel. Whether you're dreaming of Disney, Key West, a cruise, or Alaska adventure, Kevin can help you close those 37 browser tabs and plan a trip that actually fits how you travel. Learn more at outaheretravel.com and tell him we sent you. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today. I am so glad you're here, so glad you stayed, and so glad you're part of what we're doing. Have a great day, and we'll talk soon.